introduction about this book, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, represents the fruit of many years' travel and research. I look back across the years to the 7-year-old wizard who spent hours in his bedroom dismembering horklumps, and I envy him the journeys to come, from darkest jungle to brightest desert. From mountain peak to marshy bog, that grubby horklump-encrusted boy would track, as he grew up, the beasts described in the following pages. I have visited lairs, burrows, and nests across 5 continents, observed the curious habits of magical beasts in 100 countries, witnessed their powers, gained their trust and, on occasion, beaten 'em off with my traveling kettle. The first edition of Fantastic Beasts was commissioned back in 1918 by Mr. Augustus Wormay of Obscurus Books, who was kind enough to ask me whether I would consider writing an authoritative compendium of magical creatures for his publishing house. I was then but a lowly Ministry of Magic employee and leapt at the chance both to augment my pitiful salary of 2 sickles a week and to spend my holidays traveling the globe in search of new magical species. The rest is publishing history. This introduction is intended to answer a few of the most frequently asked questions that have been arriving in my weekly postbag ever since this book was first published in 1927. The first of these is the most fundamental question of all. What is a beast? What is a beast? The definition of a beast has caused controversy for centuries. Though this might surprise some first-time students of magizoology, the problem might come into clearer focus if we take a moment to consider 3 types of magical creature. Werewolves spend most of their time as humans, whether wizard or muggle, once a month. However, they transform into savage, 4-legged beasts of murderous intent and no human conscience. The centaur's habits are not human-like. They live in the wild, refuse clothing, prefer to live apart from wizards and muggles alike, and yet have intelligence equal to theirs. Trolls bear a humanoid appearance, walk upright, may be taught a few simple words, and yet are less intelligent than the dullest unicorn, and possess no magical powers in their own right except for the prodigious and unnatural strength. We now ask ourselves, which of these creatures is a being, that is to say, a creature worthy of legal rights and a voice in the governance of the magical world, and which is a beast? Early attempts at deciding which magical creatures should be designated beasts were extremely crude. Burdock Muldoon, chief of the Wizards' Council in the 14th century, decreed that any member of the magical community that walked on 2 legs would henceforth be granted the status of being, all others to remain beasts. In a spirit of friendship he summoned all beings to meet with the wizards at a summit to discuss new magical laws, and found to his intense dismay that he had miscalculated. The meeting hall was crammed with goblins who had brought with them as many 2-legged creatures as they could find. As Batilda Bagshot tells us in A History of Magic, little could be heard over the squawking of the diracals, the moaning of the auguries, and the relentless, piercing song of the whoopers. As wizards and witches attempted to consult the papers before them, sundry pixies and fairies whirled around their heads, giggling and jabbering. A dozen or so trolls began to smash apart the chamber with their clubs, while hags glided about the place in search of children to eat. The council chief stood up to open the meeting, slipped on a pile of Porlock dung and ran cursing from the hall. As we see, the mere possession of 2 legs was no guarantee that a magical creature could or would take an interest in the affairs of wizard government. Embittered, Burdock Muldoon forswore any further attempts to integrate non-wizard members of the magical community into the Wizards' Council. Muldoon's successor, Madame Elfrida Clagg, attempted to redefine beings in the hope of creating closer ties with other magical creatures. Beings, she declared, were those who could speak the human tongue. All those who could make themselves understood to council members were therefore invited to join the next meeting. Once again, however, there were problems. Trolls who had been taught a few simple sentences by the goblins proceeded to destroy the hall as before. Jarvis raced around the council's chair legs, tearing at as many ankles as they could reach. Meanwhile, a large delegation of ghosts, who had been barred under Muldoon's leadership on the grounds that they did not walk on 2 legs, but glided, attended but left in disgust at what they later termed the council's unashamed emphasis on the needs of the living as opposed to the wishes of the dead. The centaurs, who under Muldoon had been classified as beasts, and were now under Madame Clagg defined as beings, refused to attend the council in protest at the exclusion of the merpeople, who were unable to converse in anything except Mermish while above water. Not until 1811 were definitions found that most of the magical community found acceptable. Grogan Stump, the newly appointed Minister for Magic, decreed that a being was any creature that has sufficient intelligence to understand the laws of the magical community and to bear part of the responsibility in shaping those laws. Troll representatives were questioned in the absence of goblins and judged not to understand anything that was being said to them. They were therefore classified as beasts, despite their 2-legged gait. Merpeople were invited through translators to become beings for the first time. Fairies, pixies, and gnomes, despite their humanoid appearance, were placed firmly in the beast category. Naturally, the matter has not rested there. We are all familiar with the extremists who campaign for the classification of muggles as beasts. We are all aware that the centaurs have refused being status and requested to remain beasts. Werewolves, meanwhile, have been shunted between the beast and being divisions for many years. At the time of writing, there is an office for werewolf support services at the Being Division, whereas the Werewolf Registry and Werewolf Capture Unit fall under the Beast Division. Several highly intelligent creatures are classified as beasts. Because they are incapable of overcoming their own brutal natures. Acromantulas and Maticores are capable of intelligent speech, but will attempt to devour any human that goes near them. The Sphinx talks only in puzzles and riddles, and is violent when given the wrong answer. wherever there is continued uncertainty about the classification of a beast in the following pages. I have noted it in the entry for that creature. Let us now turn to the one question that witches and wizards ask more than any other when the conversation turns to magizoology. Why don't muggles notice these creatures? 1. The Wizards' Council preceded the Ministry of Magic. 2. An exception was made for the ghosts, who asserted that it was insensitive to class them as beings, when they were so clearly has-beens. Stump therefore created the 3 divisions of the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures that exist today: the Beast Division, the Being Division, and the Spirit Division. 3. The centaurs objected to some of the creatures with whom they were asked to share being status, such as hags and vampires, and declared that they would manage their own affairs separately from wizards. A year later, the merpeople made the same request. The Ministry of Magic accepted the demands reluctantly. Although a Centaur Liaison Office exists in the Beast Division of the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, no Centaur has ever used it. Indeed, being sent to the Centaur Office has become an in-joke at the department and means that the person in question is shortly to be fired.